Head into the afternoon, starting to see some longer spells of rain, particularly across the Northern Isles once again. But on the whole, plenty of dry, settled weather around and remaining fairly similar to end of the week and as we head into the weekend, and temperatures rather mild once again for the time of year.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Big problems in North Yorkshire to the southeast of Middlesbrough this evening. The A174 remains closed westbound from the Greystones roundabout at Eston through to Ormsby at the A171 at the scene of an accident. Long queues on the M6 heading north through Lancashire from junction 31 to 31A. One lane is still closed on the Preston bypass for emergency repairs following an earlier crash not being helped by the usual rush hour queues along that stretch. And in the West Midlands, east of Dudley at Tiverdale, the new Birmingham Road is blocked westbound off the junction of Regent Road following an accident. The M3 in Hampshire down to a single lane southbound at junction 11 south of Winchester following an accident. There are delays of a quarter of an hour on trains between Leicester and Peterborough after a car hit a railway bridge, and trains are at a stand down in Devon at Exeter Central due to a fire alert, GWR tell us. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
We're giving you the chance to win everything you need to celebrate the festivities. There's £20,025 in tax-free cash. There's £5,000 to spend on gifts for all the family. There's £500 to spend in your favourite supermarket. And a festively themed GB News goodie bag. We'll get it all to you in time for the big day. For your chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 22nd of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits.
Chemistry tonight is electric.
As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to Farage with me, standing in for the big man. I'm Martin Daubney. Tonight, the 18-year-old accused of murdering 3 young schoolgirls in Southport and attempting to murder 10 others faces 2 new charges. And wait for it, both of them are terror-related. Next story, the NHS isn't just on its knees, it's on its face. Labour have said that extra borrowing won't fix our broken NHS or even prevent dire winter crises, despite the Chancellor planning to pump billions of pounds into the NHS in tomorrow's budget. The NHS, let's face it, has always been in crisis. And more than 40 million Americans have already voted in an election that will have profound consequences for both them and the rest of the world, and especially us here in Blighty. With just 1 week to go to the greatest political show on earth. Who is on course to win the White House? We're discussing that with a renowned pollster later on in the show. And all of that to come. First, the news with Sophia Wensler.
Martin, thank you. Good evening. It's just gone 7 o'clock. These are your headlines. The suspect accused of murdering 3 young girls in July's Southport stabbing attacks is facing 2 new charges. Axel Rudakabana is now charged with producing the biological toxin ricin and possessing an Al-Qaeda training manual for potential terrorism preparation. The charges are separate to those over the killings of the girls. The police are not treating the stabbings as an act of terrorism. Rudakabana will appear via video link at Westminster Magistrates Court tomorrow. Meanwhile, Conservative leadership candidate Robert Jenrick said he was concerned that facts may have been withheld from the public. But Downing Street has denied the government had been involved in decision-making about the timing of the announcement about charges against the Southport attack suspect. More than 1 million low-paid workers will get a pay rise of nearly 7% next year, as the government has confirmed minimum wage will be increased in the budget tomorrow. The minimum wage will rise to £12.21 an hour next year, after the Chancellor confirmed a 6.7% increase ahead of the budget. Businesses have warned of the impact of a rise alongside an increase in the national insurance contributions that they must pay on wages. But Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Darren Jones, says it's good news.
Delighted that the government can announce today the national living wage will increase by nearly 7%, which for a full-time worker will mean an increase of over £1,400 a year. This is a down payment on commitment to make living standards improve for working people across the country, and I know it will be good news for workers in receipt of that increase in their wages in due course. I think we're all clear that a pro-worker, pro-business approach to the economy is the right approach, and investing in your workforce is a great way to improve your productivity, not least because you'll have more people across the country with more money in their pocket being able to spend it in the economy.
Meanwhile, the Chancellor says the NHS is the lifeblood of Britain, promising to reverse a decade of neglect and underinvestment. But she warns that a single budget can't undo 14 years of damage. It comes as Rachel Reeves is set to unveil a budget injecting billions into the NHS, funding 2 million more appointments, with £1.5 billion aimed at new surgical hubs and scanners and £70 million for radiotherapy. To the US now, where Donald Trump has taken aim at his rival Kamala Harris, accusing her of heartless and cold-blooded betrayal over borders. The Republican presidential candidate has been speaking at his Mar-a-Lago, Florida residence with 1 week to go till the US election. Despite keeping crowds waiting, he was greeted by chants of USA, USA. Trump also took another swipe at Harris, claiming she launched a coup to steal presidency from Joe Biden. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Martin.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to news alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
A very good evening to you. Welcome to Farage with me, Martin Dalby, standing in for Nigel Farage, who's busy voting tonight. Now, the 18-year-old accused of murdering 3 young schoolgirls in Southport in July and attempting to murder 10 others has also been charged with attempting to make a biological weapon using the deadly toxin ricin. Axel Rudakabana is also facing a second charge under the Terrorism Act, possessing an Al-Qaeda terror manual. And let's now hear from our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, who is in Merseyside earlier today, reporting on this for us.
It's 3 months since that horrific attack in Southport that left 3 innocent young girls dead, 8 others injured, along with 2 adults. And now the significant development, the announcement by Merseyside Police of 2 new charges against the key suspect, Axel Rudakabana. He will now face charges relating to the production of the deadly toxin ricin and also a terror charge relating to the downloading of an Al-Qaeda terror manual. This is what the Merseyside Chief Constable, Serena Kennedy, said a little earlier.
The 2 further offences relate to evidence obtained by Merseyside Police during searches of Axel Rudakabana's home address as part of a lengthy and complex investigation which has been ongoing since the 29th of July. The additional charges are the production of a biological toxin, namely ricin, contrary to Section 1 of the Biological Weapons Act 1974. and possession of information, namely a PDF file entitled Military Studies in the Jihad Against the Tyrants, the Al-Qaeda Training Manual, likely to be useful to a person committing or preparing to commit an act of terrorism, contrary to Section 58 of the Terrorism Act 2000.
Well, the Southport attack led to a great deal of anger and an outbreak of violent disorder in a number of towns and communities in England and Northern Ireland. The Merseyside Chief Constable is calling for calm amongst the public as they absorb the news of these two new charges, and is urging the public not to speculate, given that this case is now active.
I would strongly advise anyone against speculating as to the motivation in this case. The criminal proceedings against Axel Rudikabana are live, and he has a right to a fair trial. It is extremely important that there is no reporting, commentary or sharing of information online that could prejudice these proceedings. I want to remind everyone that the trial is scheduled for January next year.
Well, Axel Rudikabana is due to appear before Videolink at Westminster Magistrates Court in West London tomorrow to face the two new charges against him.
Thank you, Mark Wyatt, for that update in a case that asks a huge amount of questions. Now, moving on, Halloween budget day is almost upon us. Prepare for a fright night. There is at least one treat for low-paid workers, however, because Chancellor Rachel Reeves announced this evening that more than 3 million workers will receive a pay rise next year, following a 6.7% hike in the national living wage. Let's have a listen to Labour's Chief Secretary to the Treasury.
Well, I'm delighted that the government can announce today the national living wage will increase by nearly 7%, which for a full-time worker will mean an increase of over £1,400 a year. This is a down payment on commitment to make living standards improve for working people across the country, and I know it will be good news for workers in receipt of that increase in their wages in due course.
Now, for the statos out there, the wage is set to increase from £11.44 an hour to £12.21 an hour from April 2025. However, employers are concerned that this move might be more of a trick, ultimately driving up their costs. Now, in addition to this announcement, businesses also anticipate an increase in national insurance contributions expected to be addressed during the Chancellor's budget announcement tomorrow. Now, is this the right move from the government? Well, Anna Gross, the political correspondent at the Financial Times, joins me now in the studio. Thank you for joining me. Always a pleasure. So it might be a treat for employees getting a pay rise that's triple the rate of inflation, but is it a trick for employers, estimated to cost £6 billion across the board when you add all of this up? Is this really the right thing to be doing at a time when small businesses are particularly feeling the pinch?
Well, the government has said time and time again that they want this to be a budget for working people. And I suppose it's clear here, it's becoming, patently clear in the past 2 weeks that the pain of this budget is predominantly going to be felt by employers and by business. This is a real bounty, as you say, for working people. Especially the young on the national minimum wage will receive an extra £2,500 a year, which is really significant. And actually, the UK already had one of the highest national minimum wages of developed countries. And now it's really, at one of the very top. But as you say, we're going to hear a lot of blowback on this from businesses, because as well as this, they're also facing 20 billion increase in national insurance contributions, which is also going to be, really painful.
And the big phrase, working people, I don't know what it means. Nobody knows what it means. Nobody from the Labour Party seems to know. I've asked a bunch of them. It seems like it's the new Brexit means Brexit. It sounds good, but what does it mean? And in particular, has to be said that the types of industries that will be impacted by this, many of them have already been feeling the pinch. Hospitality. Look at the Great British Boozer. Wetherspoons, I noticed their share price is plummeting today. Minimum wage employees are a part of the fabric of their business by dint of the nature. Highly transient, largely lesser skilled workforce. They'll be meeting those costs. They have to pass them on. So in that sense, it is a tax on working people because the price of your pint will surely go up. The price of your sandwiches will surely go up. Can the country afford this at the moment? Businesses are absolutely under the cosh. They're bracing themselves for a huge amount of pain tomorrow. This might sound good in a sixth form debate, but £6 billion of costs, that is painful.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, there are always unforeseen consequences when you make these tax moves that potentially sound good on paper. You mentioned the hospitality sector. Their trade body is saying it's going to have a sort of 1.9 billion, roughly 2 billion impact per year on the sector. And as you say, businesses aren't just going to, roll over and accept that they're going to make less profit. On the whole, it'll mean, increasing prices, which can impact consumers. It might mean reducing staff, which has an impact on the staff itself. And the government has said that it wants to reduce net migration to the UK. But a lot of people might think, well, it's costing a lot more to hire people. Maybe we're going to hire some people from overseas for some of these jobs and do it a little bit less on the books. These are the kinds of unforeseen consequences you can see. But I think that the government is prioritising trying to get the economy growing, and it sees putting money in individuals' pockets so that they can spend more and, invest it in the economy that way as potentially the kind of quickest, sharpest way of boosting the economy.
You're absolutely right, Anna, to point out that dependency on cheap labour from overseas. We saw big business addicted to cheap labour in the Brexit years. It's got worse. Somehow it's got worse. Importing cheaper labour, what you find oftentimes is that Brits simply can't afford the rents. They can't afford the cost. And so these kind of employees, they get in multiple occupancy houses, they cram in together, they take up the jobs. Has this really been thought through?
Yeah, I mean, you would hope it has been. And just to say, it is illegal to hire illegal immigrants in these kinds of sectors. It does happen, of course, but, theoretically they should be paying, even if they are overseas labour, they should be paying them the same rate. But, you can always create unforeseen consequences and kind of negative responses if businesses are driven into difficult situations. I would say, businesses, when they're told there are going to be tax rises, they do shout foul. That is their job. That is what they do. That's their role, is to lobby the government to try to make sure that their costs come down. So there's always, I think it's always worth taking a little bit, these claims with a pinch of salt. And I'm sure a lot of your viewers, or many of your viewers, may be on the minimum wage, and they'll be saying it's been we've had a cost of living crisis for a long time, and this will be a massive boost to us.
Do you think, Anna, this is another one of those kind of socialist, not a pipe dream, but it's a well-meaning thing? Let's fight for a minimum. Everybody wants people to get a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. But we're seeing the great giveaway. We're seeing a state giveaway to NHS workers cost the economy £10 billion. NHS workers and teachers, £500 million to junior doctors, millions more to train drivers, already get 60 grand a year. They're on a 3-day week. They get a bonus for working a regular week. It seems to be the great British giveaway.
Well, the question of whether it's a giveaway kind of hinges upon whether you think that money is literally going down the drain. And I think that there is an argument, so, taking a couple of those junior doctors, there is an argument that morale has been incredibly low for junior doctors. The system has been crumbling. It's not working well. A lot of doctors have been going overseas, going to Australia. They can make a hell of a lot more money there. If you invest money in those people, you're investing in the service. You're investing in making it work better. You're investing in productivity. And so, is that a giveaway? Not necessarily. Not if that money is actually going towards growth, towards improving the services. And I suppose you could say the same about giving workers extra money. That's not necessarily, just going to go down the bin. they are going to be spending that money in the economy, on clothes, on various things that does have a kind of circular effect on growth.
But it is a great British giveaway to public sector workers when working people end up paying it. Thank you very much, Anna Gross from the FT. Thank you, always a pleasure. Now, as we just said, tomorrow is Budget Day on GB News, and we'll have a comprehensive coverage throughout the day.
Budget Day on GB News tomorrow. Stay with us all day for the most anxiously anticipated budget in a generation.
Morning through to evening, we'll be here with insight and analysis, crunching the numbers
as we work out the cost to the country and, most importantly, to you.
Because the Chancellor has a bill to pay. The question is...
who's going to pay it?
Budget Day, tomorrow on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And from 6 p.m. tomorrow, we'll have all of the fallouts to tomorrow's Halloween Eve budget. The positives and the negatives with a stellar lineup of guests, including former Prime Minister Liz Truss, Conservative leadership candidate Robert Jenrick and former Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng, as well as voices from across the political spectrum. Now, coming up next, Labour have admitted that the billions set to be spent on boosting the NHS won't stop the NHS facing real problems for the rest of this year. Let's face it, the NHS has always been in crisis.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Millions are struggling to stay warm with the wet weather, the cost of living and, of course, cuts to fuel payments.
Yes, winter is fast approaching, so it's crucial to find cost-effective ways to save on your energy expenses whilst staying reasonably warm.
So joining us to provide advice on heating your home, or at least staying warm somehow, is one of the leading voices on lowering energy bills, Nick Miles. And you are very welcome in here this morning. I mean, a lot of people say, well, in the olden days, you just used to put on an extra jumper. But actually, it's more serious than that, isn't it? What is the best way, the most cost-effective way, to keep your home warm?
Some of the bigger things is we need to do more things on insulating our properties, but actually sometimes, it can be simple things like turning down a thermostat. Those that have got the luxury of being able to afford energy bills and keep their homes on the thermostat a bit too high. If you just turn it down by one simple degree, as long as you keep it between 18 and 22 degrees, can save up to 5 to 10% of your energy bill. So that's a kind of a very simple way of doing things, but it can be other little tips and tricks you can do as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I always get it when people say about this, but like 18 degrees is not warm for a house.
No, and it's twofold actually. It's that kind of relative temperature, but also it's the kind of drafts and things you have in your house. So it's the comfort factor. So what we have a lot of old properties in our country. You've got some 8 million hard-to-treat properties built before World War II that have got poor insulation, but also very, very drafty. So it's the temperature and it's the kind of the draftiness of them that kind of keeps us uncomfortable.
GB News, the People's Channel. Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Okoye, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage with me, Martin Daubney, covering for Nigel tonight. Now, the 18-year-old accused of murdering 3 young schoolgirls in Southport and attempting to murder 10 others has also been charged with attempting to make a biological weapon using the deadly nerve toxin ricin. Axel Rudier Cabana is also facing a second charge under the Terrorism Act for possessing an Al-Qaeda terror manual. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper has released the following statement. She says this: these additional charges will undoubtedly be distressing for people in Southport. The most important thing is to get justice for Bibi, Alice and Elsie and their heartbroken families and all of those affected by the attack, and nobody should be put at risk. The police and prosecutors have an important job to do in their investigation, pursuing every avenue and taking the action they need to ahead of the trial. We must support them and ensure that everything possible is done to deliver justice. Now, it's the big day tomorrow. You've been waiting for it, bracing yourselves, no doubt, looking from behind the sofa, because Rachel Reeves' first budget. We've all been told to expect potentially painful tax rise hikes. Now, possibly to even eye-watering levels. We'll have to wait and see. But encouragingly, or not, the Health Secretary has briefed that billions extra will not fix the NHS. They'll only stop its decline from accelerating further. Heartening news, isn't it? Now, no matter what happens, make sure you stick with GB News tomorrow for the best analysis in town. And the pre-budget drama already begun when yesterday the Speaker of the House of Commons furiously rebuked Rachel Reeves for breaking protocol by releasing budget secrets to American TV channels before the plans were even announced to Parliament here in Britain. Now, here is what he had to say.
Honourable members may be wondering how they will get a seat on Wednesday. Well, to be quite honest, the way it's going, you won't need to. We'll have all have heard it first in here. It's not acceptable. I don't want it to continue, and I want to treat this House with the respect it deserves. I'm not whether this side or that side. It is totally unacceptable to go around the world telling everybody rather than these members. They were elected by the constituents of this country, and they deserve to be treated better, whatever. And isn't it funny? When it was the previous party, it was the opposite side that was complaining to me. Get your acts together, all sides. Treat members with respect.
Hoyle there brought to the boil, finally shouting at the Labour Party and not the Conservatives. Now, meanwhile, the NHS is not just on its knees, it's on its face. That was the heartwarming warning from the Health Secretary earlier on this morning. At a final pre-budget briefing, the Health Secretary unveiled that the NHS will be given yet another additional £1.5 billion in funding next year to spend on new surgical hubs and scanners. However, speaking to us this morning on GB News, he admitted the significant improvements will take time.
There's no beating about the bush about it, whether it's the size of the waiting list, the fact that people can't guarantee an ambulance turns up on time, the struggle to get a GP appointment or a dentist, the waits in A&E. The NHS is not just on its knees, it's on its face. And what tomorrow's budget will give us the chance to do is arrest that decline and mark a turning point in the history of the NHS and in the decline we've seen over the last 14 years.
West Streeting earlier on GB News. Now, joining me now to discuss this and more is my stellar panel. It's the former Conservative MP and Minister Dame Andrea Jenkins and the journalist and the former Press Secretary to Paddy Ashdown, Joe Phillips. Welcome to the show to both
Thank you,
of
Martin.
you. I'll start with you, if I could, Dame Andrea. So Lindsay there, losing it, is fair to say, on the Labour Party. But on a serious point, a lot of people are bracing themselves for a huge amount of pain in this budget tomorrow, be it shareholders, be it pensioners, be it savers, be it landlords, be it motorists. Everybody seems to be in for a world of pain. What's your take?
I think quite rightly they are worried. I'm concerned myself, and I'm concerned whether what we was hearing a couple of months ago, will they be removing the single person's occupancy with the council tax, because that's going to really hammer a lot of people as well, and especially widows, etc. But I do wonder as well, though, because we're seeing so much negativity, are they going to pull some rabbits out of the hat?
Right.
I'm wondering if they're trying to manage expectations, and it wouldn't surprise me, though, actually, if the 2 years before the next general election, then they suddenly miraculously find this money.
So do you think that's what's happening here, Joe? They've been, let's face it, Tony Blair, things are going to get better. Since Sir Keir Starmer came, things are going to get more nightmarish. It's been a constant sort of attrition of bad news, of grey, sombre headlines. His own approval ratings have gone off a cliff today. He's now down to -38. It's spectacular. 49% fall, the least popular Prime Minister in history.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, when Tony Blair came in 97, the economy wasn't in such a dreadful state. I mean, he had got a good economy and life was very different then. We hadn't had COVID, we hadn't had Brexit, you know, and so on and so forth. The Labour Party or the government have got off to a bad start, much of it through their own incompetence in terms of communications, messaging and dealing with problems. And some of the problems were completely unnecessary. You know, the freebies and all of that stuff, the ridiculous way the winter fuel allowance cut was announced and nothing put in its place. The other thing that we've had, Martin, is this: it's the longest gap ever, I think, since an election to a budget. And that has meant that the vacuum has been filled with speculation, lobbying, you know, old people are going to die of the cold, somebody else is going to get this.
That's what the Labour Party said themselves in 2017.
And I do think Lindsay Hoyle is absolutely right, and I think Andrea and I actually agree on this.
Completely.
It is quite wrong for MPs and ministers of any party to forget the importance of the building over the road and why it is there. And, you know, Parliament is there to hold government to account. We elect a Parliament, not a government. And I think that's really, really important. And I think, you know, one of the things I remember as a journalist working on city desks years ago, you know, you'd have to wait. You'd send somebody, a courier, to go and pick up the budget. Your city editor would be, you know, frantically going through it, trying to... Nobody knew anything. It was secret.
Well, especially with them actually briefing internationally before.
That's right.
Well,
in the UK, it's just appalling,
you sort of think, well, you might pull a rabbit out of the hat, but it's going to be a very threadbare rabbit because we know everything. You know, we know about the minimum wage, we know about you know, winter fuel, we know about various other things. I don't think she's got a lot of room to manoeuvre. And, you know, whether you like it or not, that is inherited from the Conservatives. I think.
But also, look at the pay rises, though. I mean, look at the public sector pay rise.
10 billion quid.
It was ridiculous, and the money they're spending on net zero as well.
Well, look at the money that was wasted on HS2. Look at the money that was wasted on dodgy COVID contracts for mates of, you know, some of your former colleagues, Andrea. You know, there's money has been wasted, there is no doubt, over the years. And I think, you know, what will happen is we need to see. We can have the pain, but we need to see some difference quite quickly.
OK, ding, ding. End of round one. Thank you very much. Superb start to the show there, Andrea and Joe. Great stuff. Thanks to my panel. Now, up next, figures released today show the civil servants in the MOD now outnumber Navy and RAF personnel. What on earth is going on? Does Britain have its defence priorities completely and utterly wrong?
Hello, good evening and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Quite cloudy this evening, and as we head into tomorrow, though, it should be largely dry. But where we see those clear spells overnight, we are expecting to see some mist and fog, which may be quite slow to clear during the morning. That's because we've got an area of high pressure moving a ridge towards the UK, so that's bringing largely dry, fine and settled conditions today and as we head into this week. On the whole, then, this evening, a mix of cloud and some clearer spells, staying largely dry, though there may just be some spots of rain and drizzle, this mainly around hilly areas. And where we see those clearer skies, that's where we'll see the mist and fog develop, which may just be slow to clear during the morning. Feeling a little chilly under those clearer skies, but on the whole, a fairly mild night, so a mild start to Wednesday. Bit of a mixed bag, really. We've got plenty of cloud across Scotland, though it is going to be largely dry. Just a few showers beginning to feed into the Northern Isles. Once again, largely dry across Northern Ireland, northern parts of England, though still can't rule out spots of rain and drizzle, particularly around those hillier areas. Across the rest of England and Wales, a dry start. Once again, a mix of cloud and those clearer spells, and that mist and fog, which may just be slow to clear. But as that high pressure builds for Wednesday, there'll be plenty of dry weather around. Some cloudier skies at times, but once again, we will see some brighter spells. Just starting to see some showers and some longer spells of rain starting to creep into the Northern Isles as we head into the afternoon. Now, we're going to see a slight dip in those temperatures tomorrow, but it's still largely mild for the time of year. For Thursday, it's a fairly similar picture. Once again, some mist and fog to start, but it is going to be largely dry. Damp across Scotland, though, particularly as we head into the afternoon, starting to see some longer spells of rain, particularly across the Northern Isles once again. But on the whole, plenty of dry, settled weather around and remaining fairly similar to end of the week and as we head into the weekend. And temperatures rather mild once again for the time of year.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Budget Day on GB News tomorrow. Stay with us all day for the most anxiously anticipated budget in a generation.
Morning through to evening, we'll be here with insight
and analysis, crunching the numbers
as we work out the cost to the country and, most importantly, to you.
Because the Chancellor has a bill to pay. The question is,
who's going to pay it? Budget Day tomorrow on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage with me, Martin Daubney. Now, the Ministry of Defence now has more civil servants than personnel in both the Royal Navy and the RAF combined. A staggering shift that's raising eyebrows as the armed forces shrink to historic lows. Now, while military ranks dwindle, MOD civil servant staffing has absolutely surged. The figures released today show there are now more than 63,702 civilians working in the MOD compared to 57,260 trained members of the RAF and the Navy. It's astonishing. It's really and utterly staggering, isn't it? Now, you do have to wonder if we've totally lost our priorities. And to discuss this, I'm now delighted to say I'm joined by the former Defence Minister and the former Chairman of the Defence Select Committee, Tobias Ellwood. Tobias, you know, I always figured we'd become a nation of pen pushers. The MOD seem to think the pen is mightier than the sword.
Yeah, I mean, on the face of it, this does look extremely lopsided. The priority must be trained, combat-ready, frontline personnel. And I understand before the election, the Conservatives were looking to cut 3,000 civil service places to save money. I certainly hope that Labour will pick that up. If I may, I would like to keep these numbers in context. As a former soldier myself, they're not just the pen pushers, the Sir Humphrey Applebys in the Whitehall machine. They're also the chefs, the guards, the cleaners, the managers that keep any airbase or any garrison going. Jobs that were once done by those in uniform, but are now outsourced to the civilian sector in order to save money. But yes, it doesn't look good. But these numbers actually shine light on how small our armed forces have become. They remain extremely professional, well-trained, but simply not large enough to cope with complex and growing threats that we're clearly facing. And we've got the forthcoming budget. I do hope that this will be raised there, along with the defence review that's coming up, to address the fact that all three services, the Navy, the Army, the Air Force, are simply too small for the demands that we're already placing them. We have to increase the defence budget, but I'm afraid that won't happen until the public, the British people, feel that threat and call for an increase in defence spending. Because, as you've just been outlining and talking about other big issues to be discussed in the budget, until there's more politically pressing concerns that are overshadowed, such as health and welfare, they will receive the increases, not the MOD. But I simply can't stress enough just how dangerous our world's now becoming. Putin is not losing in Ukraine. America is becoming more isolationist. China's becoming more assertive, and Iran is becoming more aggressive. And there's a growing void in global statecraft, in leadership on the international stage. And Britain can fill it. And we've done it before, but only if we invest in our hard power, as you underline.
But the fact of the matter is, this 63,702 civil servants, that's about 1,200 platoons of soldiers. But what value do they bring? I mean, we're mired down in bureaucratic red tape. Recruitment is an all-time low. We've got endless diversity nonsense, net zero nonsense, LGBTQ poppies, white working class men. Historically, since the beginning of British history, the most likely to take up arms and bear arms and fight and die for their country, now made to feel like pariahs, isn't the problem. We don't need just a bigger army, we need less of these pen pushers.
Well, as I tried to describe, they're not all just pen pushers themselves, but I agree with your sentiment that the numbers themselves don't look good. But ultimately, the Army, the Air Force and the Navy have shrunk over the last 10 years, partly because we've not appreciated that there is a growing threat out there. I can't stress any more. I do this all the time. There is a 1937 feel to our world right now, and we are so unprepared as to what's happening. I stress again, I'm just returned back from the United States. America is turning more isolationist. Europe will have to look at some of our problems alone, and when Europe is in trouble, it normally looks to Britain for the answers. If we're to provide the solutions, absolutely we need to invest in our hard power. But we can't keep a standing army. That's simply too expensive. We need to look at other models, such as we see in Scandinavia, where there's an all-of-society approach to actually bolstering our resilience, our capability, and indeed our readiness.
But it's just a question of priorities, surely, Tobias. If we can find, 26 billion quid for foreign climate aid, if we can find 22 billion quid for carbon capture, if we can find 10 billion quid for public sector pay rises, the money's there. We've found 50 billion quid down the back of the sofa by bending the fiscal rules at the forthcoming budget. It's not a question of money, it's a question of priorities. And the priorities doesn't seem to be there to beef up our armed forces.
You're absolutely right. You get it. I certainly understand it as well. But I stress that much of the discussions you're going to be having over the next couple of days is all going to be about domestic matters. It won't be about the storm clouds gathering again. It won't be the fact that we lack a ground-based air defense, that we haven't got anything like Israel has to protect London or any indeed other city from an air attack. The fact that we lack airborne early warning systems, pilot training and so forth, and indeed made battle tanks. All these things will not be discussed tomorrow in the budget, I promise you. And until they are, it's going to be very, very difficult to then demand the money that's required. It may need a Sputnik moment, an event, a colossal event that suddenly everybody wakes up to and says, now I appreciate what Russia and China and indeed Iran are doing and where they're taking our world.
Tobias Ellwood, excellent as ever. Thank you very, very much for joining us on the show. Always a pleasure to have your company. Let's continue the chat now with my stellar panel. Former Conservative MP and Minister Dame Andrea Jenkins, and the journalist and the former press secretary to Paddy Ashdown, Joe Phillips. Joe, let's start with you. Is there a serious commitment from the Labour Party to go for the amount of GDP we need to spend on defence? There seems to be endless money for Zelensky. There seems to be endless money for fighting battles, be it climate battles or battles abroad. What about domestic British forces?
The point that Tobias just made has... it stood the test of time with the previous government and previous prime ministers. The truth of the matter is, Martin, people are more concerned about what's happening on the doorstep and the domestic things, and Andrea will know this from, when she had constituents, when she was an MP. It's what's happening on the doorstep. It's very hard to sell to the public an increase in defence that might be. It's the just in case. And he's absolutely right. We are living perhaps in a 1937 moment. We're seeing the rise of rogue states. The geopolitical world is changing hugely. You know, you see new power bases in China and Iran and India, never mind Russia. We've got war in the Middle East. We've got war on Europe's doorstep in Ukraine. So until it comes home, I think, and, you know, God forbid that it should, but I think there is a real thing. People don't want to spend money on the just in case. Yeah. But the point, you know, that we opened this discussion about, the number of civil servants more than the number of Navy and RAF is just bonkers, and it would be very interesting. But it did go up under the previous government.
Now, Andrea, the Labour Party will say they need to spend money domestically to grow the economy, so we don't have the bandwidth to increase GDP for defence at this point. But can I ask you a more profound question? Rishi Sunak brought in conscription, the compulsory sign-up, where he tried to, and it turns out, guess what? Young people don't particularly want to fight for the country. No. Is there a bigger problem here? And that is, young people are taught, seemingly from the cradle, that Britain isn't a country to be proud of, and therefore it's not even a country that you'd even want to consider fighting for. Is the will to fight for Britain there, particularly amongst young people now?
I don't think it is, actually. Even when you used to visit schools as a MP and speak to young people, I think you've hit the nail on the head. And I think with what Tobias said, what you've both said, we're all in agreement here, and these emerging threats. And the feel with the public is that they want the domestic issues sorted first. But as you quite rightly said, Martin, why we're spending this on the climate agenda, we should be protecting our country. And yes, I think if we can have more pride in our country, instilled even at school-age level, like you're suggesting, then maybe we'll be in a different and better place in the future.
Super stuff, Dame Andrea, and also Joe. Great stuff, thanks to my panel. Now, today marks 1 week precisely until the US presidential election, the greatest political show on earth. And we'll be assessing the state of the race with the renowned pollster. Who's on course to be the next president of the United States? You don't want to miss that conversation. That's coming next.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Catherine Richards and Jake Singleton-Hill featured on the reality show Love is Blind.
Well, Catherine and Jake are joining us now in the studio for Saturday Morning Live. Thank you very much for joining us. And this is perhaps not the end result that people might have thought that they'd be seeing at this point, because you were both on the show, but you didn't fall in love in the pods, did you?
No,
we didn't.
I rejected him.
You guys look great together.
Yeah.
Very happy as well. It seemed like you guys were really strong, and it almost seemed like Freddie, after he admitted to you that he'd cheated in the past.
I actually respected the fact that he told me up front. I didn't even want to have that conversation, obviously. That was a conversation that we got told to talk about. And I respected his decision, but I think he felt that I was holding this grudge towards him that she really doesn't like, and which was not, and he knew this, because off camera we had many conversations where I was like, thank you for owning up, like, we can just move on from this. But if anything, I think he just felt guilty the whole entire time, and he put that on me, which is fine, but yeah, there's obviously a lot that people don't see.
So for viewers who don't know, Love is Blind is where you go and seek love and romance, but you don't see who you're speaking to, right?
No.
So, Jake, why did you go on the show?
My parents actually met in a very similar way. So my stepdad was texting my mum. He'd basically stolen the number off of a friend because the friend had met my mum in Blackpool, and they were texting for like 6 months. They'd never met. So that premise of how they got together and the marriage that they had was stunning. And to build a relationship not based on looks before you met, I just found that just incredible.
So do you believe in that concept? Is it lust or love at first sight?
It's weird.
It's a bit of both.
I think, it's definitely a bit of both. And I always say, as you get older, your looks will change, but your personality will stay the same.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about.
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry, tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage with me, Martin Daubney, covering for the big man. Now, just a week to go until Election Day in the United States, and the race for the White House is razor thin. Kamala Harris holds a narrow lead, some might say, over Donald Trump in certain national polls, but key battleground states are totally up for grabs, making the outcome anything but certain. Now, will America elect its first woman president, or will Donald Trump reclaim the Oval Office? So, how close is the race really, and what should we watch out for in these final days? Well, here to give us the latest polling insights is James Johnson, a former political advisor, pollster, and the co-founder of JL Partners, live from New York with a resplendent Stars and Stripes building behind you. Just for context, James, it looks too close to call. The polls, as ever, seem to be pretty all over shot, but the money, the gambling money, the pollster money, seems to be on Donald Trump. Tell us more.
Well, actually, in Western Pennsylvania, Martin, because in true swing country here, and this is a state in Pennsylvania which is really going to decide the election. If Trump takes this, he wins. If Harris takes this, she wins. That's what our model is saying. Now, look, in terms of what happens in a week's time, it is a very close race. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But we do think the race currently leans towards Donald Trump. Our model, which takes all of the different polls out there and weights them depending on what we think is the best methodology out there and what was happened in previous elections too, shows a 68% chance of a Trump victory. Now, look, that's not 90%, that's not 80%. We're still saying there's a 1 in 3 chance that Kamala Harris could win, but we think this is a race in Trump's favor. We're talking to voters out here in Pennsylvania this week, doing interviews, focus groups, and the thing that comes across really clearly is this word strong, strength. They want to see that strength from a politician. They feel that Donald Trump has it. They don't feel that Kamala Harris does.
James, may I ask you about the reliability of the polls? The polls didn't get 2016 Trump right. They didn't get Brexit right. They didn't really get much right in Britain at the last election either. And we know there's a preponderance to shy away from admitting you're a Trump voter. I call them the silent Trumps. I think you can probably see what I did there. Are the polls accurate this time, or are people keeping their cards close to their chest once again?
But I will say they're not very silent Trump here. This is a huge house, daubed in an American flag. It's got a massive Trump sign up the front. It's got a Trump cardboard cutout. And you do see more Trump signs out, people say, than in previous elections. But look, the polls understated Donald Trump in 2016 and 2020. And there's no sign to say that that couldn't be happening again. You know, these less educated voters, more working class, more skeptical of mainstream media, aren't necessarily picking up the phone to pollsters like me. Now, look, we think in our polls we've corrected for a bit of that error because we use a mixed method approach. So we phone people up. We also do online polls. We also text people and pick them up when they're playing games on their in apps. But look, we don't know exactly what's going to happen. But the polls are looking more Trumpy than they did in either 2016 or 2020. If there is a polling error like there was last time, then this is Trump's race to lose. If there is a polling error like there was in both of those elections, then Trump could absolutely storm this. Look, it could work the other way too. The fact is, pollsters don't know for sure until after we get the result. We could all be missing something else, but I suspect that this race is looking a bit more Trumpy than it is Harrisy at this stage.
68%, that's pretty good margins. And meanwhile, on the money markets, Trump is 4-7 with the bookies. That's the shortest price he's ever been in all of the 3 presidential races. So the money's getting behind Trump. His own stock, Trump media, has soared like 170% in the last month. People gambling on Trump for that win. Can I ask you about Pennsylvania? There's this big furore about the comments about Puerto Rico made at Madison Square Garden. Of course, Pennsylvania, a key state, only 80,000 votes decided it last time. 600,000 Puerto Ricans in Pennsylvania. Will the comments there matter? I mean, they've called him Hitler, they've called him a fascist, they've called him racist and every name under the sun for the last 8 years. Will any of this make any difference, do you think, to these final crucial 7 days?
Yeah, look, it's really hard to say because almost every group matters in this election because the margins are so tight. Now, there are lots of Puerto Ricans in Pennsylvania, particularly in the city of Philadelphia. Whether this makes the impact, though, I'm not so sure. Speaking to swing voters out here, Hispanic voters, black voters, white voters alike, people just aren't mentioning it. They're focused instead on the big issues like the border, like the economy. I'm picking up from people this feeling that Kamala Harris is looking slightly desperate by making these attacks on Trump, referring to him as a fascist, saying that he'd invoke Hitler in government. I don't think that's the thing that persuades voters. And actually, voters are saying to me, this is a bit of a desperate last-ditch attempt. You don't say this if you're winning. Now, look, that's not to say that there aren't hesitations about Trump's personality. There are. And you hear over and over again, he's divisive, he's rude, he's aggressive. But generally speaking, they might think that, but they also say he gets things done, he's strong, he's respected by America's enemies. So look, my sense is, and I was at that rally at Madison Square Garden talking to voters, and my sense is that actually this is not some, great story that's going to change and shift the election. I'm not hearing it out here. Will it get a few Puerto Rican voters out to vote? Potentially, but I don't see that featuring more heavily than big issues like the economy, immigration, and abortion.
James Johnson, an excellent star-spangled contribution to the show. Thank you very, very much for joining us there from America. Thank you very much. Now, let's have a quick reaction with my panel. Former Conservative MP and Minister Dame Andrea Jenkins and the journalist and former press secretary to Paddy Ashdown, Joe Phillips. Also, Hoved interview, Jacob Rees-Mogg. I'll start with you, Joe. So Trump's going to win. Could we see the biggest temper tantrum on the planet?
What, from Trump? We will if he doesn't win.
From the Democrats, from the world of the liberal left. It seems increasingly all of the old tactics, you're a fascist, you're a misogynist, you're a white supremacist, they're not working.
I think Trump winning will be very bad for the world. I mean, we were just talking with Tobias Ellerwood about the state of the world. Trump would like to get out of NATO.
Fewer wars under Trump than we've seen under Biden.
Yes, well, what would he have said to Putin? Yeah, go on, or you've had Crimea, go on, take Ukraine. So he stops supporting Ukraine, he stops NATO, he brings in tariffs against China.
He was saying pay your ways in NATO. He made them pay money. He did more for NATO than any previous president.
We'll see, Martin. I think he's dangerous. I think he's, and it wasn't Kamala Harris who started calling him a fascist. It was John Kelly who used to work for him. And the people who used to work for him, who actually sort of said this man is dangerous and he's unhinged. The real problem is that this time round, if he wins, he's got more people in his own mould. And I think it takes the world to a very dangerous place.
Dame Andrea, do you think they'll ever stop calling him Hitler?
No, I mean, look, you remember the Brexit years, don't you? We've all been called such lines, haven't we? And look at Michelle Obama only the last few days virtually saying lock up your daughters, really, wasn't she? So I think it's shown their desperation, and I think I want to be celebrating for Trump next week. I think is what the country needs at the moment, and I wish we had a strong leader like this in Britain.
Jacob Rees-Mogg, the final minute of the show is yours. First Trump, and then what's on your menu?
Well, on Trump, I think that anyone who is accused of being Hitler, the other side's lost the argument. It's a sign of desperation. It's a very sound rule of politics. Don't mention the war, to remind us of a GBNews colleague who said that once. What am I going to be talking about? The economy. And Red Rachel has put up a picture of the founder of the Communist Party in 11 Downing Street to replace Nigel Lawson. So we think that may be a taste of things to come in the budget tomorrow.
You think there'll be a lot of pain on Downing Street, a nightmare on Downing Street on Halloween Eve?
Well, as I came out, I saw Sixtus had his costume for Halloween with a scythe, with the Grim Reaper's scythe. I think he'll be lending it to Red Rachel tomorrow.
Excellent stuff. Thank you. Jacob Rees-Mogg, State of the Nation is right after the show. Thank you to Joe and to Dame Andrea. Superb as ever. Coming up, State of the Nation. First, though, here's your weather. I'm back tomorrow, 3 till 6.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good evening and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Quite cloudy this evening, and as we head into tomorrow, though it should be largely dry, but where we see those clear spells overnight, we are expecting to see some mist and fog, which may be quite slow to clear during the morning. That's because we've got an area of high pressure moving a ridge towards the UK, so that's bringing largely dry, fine and settled conditions today and as we head into this week. On the whole then, this evening, a mix of cloud and some clearer spells, staying largely dry, though there may just be some spots of rain and drizzle, this mainly around hilly areas. And where we see those clearer skies, that's where we'll see the mist and fog develop, which may just be slow to clear during the morning. Feeling a little chilly under those clearer skies, but on the whole a fairly mild night, so a mild start to Wednesday. A bit of a mixed bag really. We've got plenty of cloud across Scotland, though it is going to be largely dry. Just a few showers beginning to feed into the Northern Isles. Once again largely dry across Northern Ireland, northern parts of England. They still can't rule out spots of rain and drizzle, particularly around those hillier areas. Across the rest of England and Wales, a dry start. Once again a mix of cloud and those clearer spells and that mist and fog, which may just be slow to clear. But as that high pressure builds for Wednesday, there'll be plenty of dry weather around. Some cloudier skies at times, but once again we will see some brighter spells. Just starting to see some showers and some longer spells of rain starting to creep into the Northern Isles as we head into the afternoon. Now we're going to see a slight dip in those temperatures tomorrow, but it's still largely mild for the time of year. For Thursday, it's a fairly similar picture. Once again, some mist and fog to start, but it is going to be largely dry. Damp across Scotland, though, particularly as we head into the afternoon, starting to see some longer spells of rain, particularly across the Northern Isles once again. But on the whole, plenty of dry, settled weather around and remaining fairly similar to end of the week and as we head into the weekend. And temperatures rather mild once again for the time of year.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We could be delivering the perfect Christmas to you this year. First, we'll give you £20,025 in tax-free cash. Then we'll give you £5,000 to spend on all of your Christmas presents, with a further £500 in vouchers to spend at your favourite supermarket. Finally, a GB News Christmas goodie bag. You'll get it all in time for the big day. For your chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 22nd of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive?